Always back at it. You know I'm coming at you, YouTube, with my 67-day speaking challenge. I'm not stopping, making speaking a habit. And so, what I'd like to talk to you about today is Freud's idea of the personality of the individual. So, there's three types of, how he broke down personality. And so, there's the ID, there's the ego, and there's the superego. And so, he broke down the ID, the that's just what he called it. What I don't know if it stands for identification, but that was the first basic stage of a human's personality was the ID, and this ID phase is focused on short-term rewards. It was what's best for me now. Hold on, I actually have my book open. It's he bases it off the pleasure principle, and so the ID phase is mainly just looking for what's best for me in the moment, and that's what I'm gonna react and what I'm gonna do. So if I have some new pieces of clothing in front of me and I can't necessarily afford it, but I have the money, I'm gonna buy that extra sweater. I'm gonna buy those shoes. I'm gonna buy what makes me happy now, even though there's gonna be some consequences in the near future, regardless. And you know that, but it just makes you feel good, so you're gonna do it anyway. And then there's the ego, which is the realistic. It follows the realistic approach, the realistic principle. And so that's kind of like the ego focuses on the executive of your personality, and it's what's going to be good for me, but we have to be realistic. What can I actually do and be happy, but not put pain on myself in the future? So the mediator. And then there's a superego. It's focusing on what is ideal for me, what's going to look best, what's going to give me the most reward in the future, what's going to give me, short-term pain for long-term gain. I'm going to do a lot of good things now that are going to benefit me. Maybe it's not exactly what I want to do. I'm going to run 100 sprints and I'll be fast in a year instead of, just going out and partying and then having fun for a year, but then gaining 15 pounds, a freshman 15, you go into college and you gain 15 pounds because you just drank a bunch of beer in a couple months and you just partied your brains out. But that, that it's kind of the same concept. It's the superego focuses on the ideal principle, like I stated it 30 seconds ago. And so, yeah, so this is your personality, and you need to begin to realize this was a key point. This is a huge breaking point in psychology. Freud, if you ask people on the street, 9 out of 10 people, if you ask them what's a famous psychologist, they'll say Sigmund Freud. They're gonna say his name because he's famous, and he was known for psychoanalytics, psychoanalysis. They prized what he said because they believed what he said was backed up. It necessarily wasn't backed up by a lot of proof, but it was from his own mind and it made sense at the time, and so they believed him. So, 3 points. The ID, focus on the pleasure principle, the ego, the realistic principle, and then the superego, the ideal principle. So you need to realize, what do you fall under? Are you letting your ID take control of you? Are you only looking out for the short term? Or is your superego kicking in and you need to change what you're doing in your life? There's no change without a change in behavior. You need to change what you're doing in your life and then focus more on what's going to be best for you, what's going to give you the ROI, the return of investment that I always talk about. Are you reading a bunch of books right now? Are you reading magazines, newspapers, annual reports? Do you have a mentor? Are you doing any experiments? What are you doing with your life? Or are you just going out and drinking or smoking weed? That's really bad. So think about this, but you also have to be realistic. You have to bring into the ego. You can have fun. You can go hang out with some friends, do whatever you like. But in the end, when it comes down to it, are you going to do what you're going to need to do to get where you want to go in life? So you have to think about that. You need to focus and be realistic. So Focus on the middle ground, possibly see what's best for you. Try it out. Have you ever tried living for a week, just doing whatever's going to be best for you and not focusing solely on the moment and doing what you think is best? In that second, what's going to give you the most pleasure? So think about that. Realize, gotta adapt as people. Just try new things. Always be open minded. Don't have that 500-year-old archaic mind that doesn't allow for change in society. I think a lot of people fall into that category. They get confused. They don't believe that change can happen. It's this there's this indefinite optimism in society where people believe the future is going to be better, but they don't necessarily know how it's going to be better. And back in the 40s and 50s, we had definite optimism. So you need to, and that definite optimism is where you have a plan of how the future is going to get better, so that can relate to the superego, the ideal principle, like I said before. So, yes, of course, the ideal principle is the absolute perfect utopian view. Then again, bring the ego, the mediator, and the ID can be good in some cases too. I'm not saying that it's necessarily bad to just live in the moment and take it all in. I've read books, The Power of Now, live in the present moment. But that's not always a good thing. You can't always think about right now, this moment. You have to think 10, 20 years down the road, 10, 15, 20. That's a different perspective. That's more the superego. Again, going back to the ego, the realistic principle. So, yeah, I know I kind of went long on this one, but I'm just trying to just learn. This is knowledge. I'm retaining this information that I just learned. I just read this a couple hours ago, Module 55 and Module 56 for psychology, reading the psychology book, retaining information 56% better by teaching it impromptu style, just off the top of my head. Always working on the speaking skills as well. That's killing two birds with one stone, like they say, the popular phrase in society. So, anyways, think about this. Think of what it will be best for you, but also will give you some happiness at the same time, because we need to live the good life. Health, wealth, love, happiness, those principles, integrate the lifestyles. That's what it's all about, huh? And have a good night.